ideas for the programs. I like to browse through old editions of the magazines and such, and you know, ARRL made it easy on us. They last year they opened up access to QST and QEX and NCJ. What's NCJ?
National Contest.
Oh yeah, and that other one on the air. What the heck's that?
Newbies.
That's a newbie. There it is. Okay, so now we can get to all those things, which makes it a lot easier to spot folks. And one of the things you see when you start doing this is certain names just keep popping up everywhere you go. Last year we had John Fortune. What was he? He was NBC was his last three. I'm trying to remember if oh yeah, W6 NBC. And you know, John writes antenna articles like he must have them on some kind of factory floor. He just cranks those things out left and right. And you'll never guess who else also pops up every time you turn around.
That Tim Duffy guy does.
Well, yeah, but you know.
Every Tuesday.
Huh?
Every Tuesday.
Well, K9CT does. Matter of fact, I was looking around, and if you go to YouTube, K9CT. If you go to, I got a whole list here. Go to YouTube. Yep. Okay. Go to DXE, and Tim's got him up there on some of the publications today. Matter of fact, did anybody go to that QSO Today Hamfest in March? I tried to. There were a few issues, but guess who was a presenter at QSO Today? Great, sure enough. All right. So, you know, every time I think about it, the old saying about no grass growing under that guy comes to mind when I think about Craig. So Craig is very deeply immersed in electronics. He has his own business. He'll probably explain to us what it is, but it's electronics integration is the way they bill it. And he has a world-class contest station. In Illinois, he has participated in numerous Dxpeditions. My count was around 11. He could probably give us the latest version on that. And he's won numerous awards in contesting. One I spotted that I worked this year was the CQ Worldwide RIDI DX contest. And he was the North American winner in that for 2018, was it, Craig? I think. You're muted.
Actually, well, several years in a row, actually, multi-two.
Okay. So at any rate, tonight he's going to talk to us about his most recent Dxpedition to Pitcairn Island, and I'd like you to welcome Kilo 9 Charlie Tango. Craig, it's all yours.
Well, thank you. You have to allow me to share screen, though, so whoever's the host has to get in there and just allow me to share my screen.
He's going to it right now.
Okay.
You might want to mute our microphone when he's talking too.
There we go. Can you see it okay?
Yes, indeed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thanks for the nice introduction, although probably half of that I don't deserve, but anyhow. There's a world-class contest station. It's Tim Duffy's. So I'm just starting, evidently. So I was very fortunate to go on this Dxpedition, and I'll explain what that's all about. Get the focus here. Obviously, there's Mahoning Valley Amateur Radio Association, and there's the icon that we use, the logo we use for VP6R for Pitcairn Island, Dxpedition 2019. And that's actually the island. And just as an explanation, prior to this, we had attempted to go to Beauvais Island down in Antarctica. And I'm sure some of you heard about that trip and how it was not successful. And that was a great, that was kind of an empty period in my life, because we spent 31 days on a ship and ended up going to 5 continents without actually getting to the actual Dxpedition, which we were only a half a mile from. But if it wasn't for ship fire and a few other things that went wrong, we would have maybe been able to do it. The good news is somebody probably is going to be able to get there in the next year or two. So what we were doing is we were looking, the same crew wanted to be on a successful Dxpedition, so we were looking for another site. And we picked a place that we thought would be warm, good weather, civilized, and easy to get to, although that's relative. And we also decided we were going to take some new people along that have not been on a Dxpedition before. They were good operators, we knew that, but we wanted to bring somebody that wanted to go on a Dxpedition and had never done anything like that before. I'm going to, Pitcairn is actually part of the British Commonwealth, and I'm going to move along rather quickly because there's a lot to show you. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk a little bit about the, getting there. I'm going to talk about the Dxpedition aspect. We actually did a contest in the middle of the Dxpedition and some of the statistics as it relates to that. And I'm going to also take you on a scenic tour. But the reason Pitcairn is so interesting is because of actually that right there, which is a breadfruit plant. And if you've ever heard of Mutiny on the Bounty, that's really why Pitcairn is so famous, is because the HMS Bounty and Captain Bligh were sent to Tahiti, or the Polynesian Islands actually, for breadfruit plants, and they were to be for cheap food for the Caribbean islands where they had slaves and they needed food. So it turns out that Captain Bligh wasn't really a very nice guy, and I'm sure you've either read books or you've seen movies, and you heard that there was a mutiny on that boat. And what happened is Fletcher Christian actually commandeered the boat, sent Captain Bligh packing on another boat, a very small boat. Unfortunately, Captain Bligh made it back all the way to England somehow. So what happened was they, when they had mutinied, they knew that the British would be looking for them. So they were trying to find an island that they couldn't be found. And they found that Pitcairn Island, what was interesting about that is Pitcairn was mislabeled. It was actually found by the French. They identified where it was actually located. So that's why Pitcairn wasn't discovered. It was on maps, but it was in the wrong location. So they found Pitcairn and settled on there. And in 1808, well, they actually got there in 1792. But by the time anyone discovered the island, only John Adams remained of the original mutineers. What was interesting about that is there was just a few, let's say there were 8 or so people from that ship that made it there, because the rest stayed on Tahiti. That they had had a party on the boat and invited several of the Polynesian women to come along, and then they just departed, said see ya, and they brought them with them. So they had a few native men, lots of native women, and themselves. So what happened is they ended up fighting with each other and killing each other, and John Adams was the only one that remained, plus a few of the native Polynesian women. So anyhow, we decided to go to Pitcairn. That's a brief history lesson, but if you should read it, and there's really quite a story. And I have to tell you, when we prepared to go, we all read the books, or I read a couple of different books, and one about the social aspects actually of the island, because it's quite interesting. That's the location of Pitcairn. It's halfway between the Canal Zone and Auckland, New Zealand. So it's quite often been a stop. One of the most famous vessels used in ham radio de-expeditioning is the Braveheart. It's based out of New Zealand, and Nigel, who actually is a ham, was the owner of the boat. I understand in the last year now it's been sold. Nigel's still managing it, because the Bouvet Island people that are coming up in 2 years are going to be using this boat, and Nigel is managing the transportation. So when we got there, there were only 19 women, 19 men, 15 women, and 3 children. But we found out that actually 15, 17 of them were not even native to the island. They consisted of a pastor for the Seventh-day and his wife for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, a teacher for the school. They had a constable there from New Zealand. They had just all these different people that were actually assigned there by the government. when it comes to DXing and Dxpeditioning, we always check to see who needs it. And we always look back to see the history. And this is actually plotted from Club Log. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that resource. And this is where the activity has occurred over the years. And keep in mind, of course, that prior to about 2011, there was a lot of activity by VR6TC and VP6TC, Tom Christian. Some of you may have worked him and have his QSL card, but I think he died in like 2011 or 12, somewhere in there. But anyhow, there's been activity. So this is actually the old radio site. This was a military base, and this is where they have their local club station. Although I'm going to show you pictures and you'll know that it's not really active. But this was their club card. And some of you may have some of these cards. I'm just going to show you. That's Tom Christian. And I don't know if any of you have met him. Maybe Tim has, but he came to Dayton, I think, 2011, a couple years prior to his death. He just wanted him and his wife. And this is his wife, Betty Christian, who is now passed away also, but both of them were active hams. This Dave Brown is still active on the island, as well as Meralda Warren. And Meralda, we actually helped her. We stay in constant, she's actually on Facebook, and we stay in touch with her. She posts pictures all the time of the different things that they do, but she's a great gal. And Brian Young is still there. And in fact, he was on 20 meters. We gave him a 20-meter vertical. So here's some of the activities from the Dxpedition. So Japanese operation in 1993. Here's another one from Finland in 2000. Japan again in 2008. By the way, when you look at that picture, that's what almost everybody associates Pitcairn Island with, is the longboat storage area where they slide the longboats out and then they pull them back up. The sea is very difficult. This is a group here, VP6T. Some of these operators are probably well known to some of you. Also, here's a European group, VP6 Echo Uniform. So who needs it really? At the time we went, it was 67th most wanted. So we knew it wasn't really rare, but it was certainly some place to go that we could get to, and we could get permission to go to. And by the way, you have to get permission to go to all of these islands, and they want to make sure that environmentally you're not going to damage anything or hurt anything, and they want to know all about your operations. And the other thing is there's an island council, so we have to have their permission as well. So we had permission. Our goal was to have fun, which is always usually number one with any one of our group. And we also knew that low band activity had been lacking over the years. So we knew 160 and 80 would be of interest to a lot of people. You can see one of our top supporters was DX Engineering. Thank you very much, Tim. Tim has always been a great support to us. And when we went to 3Y0, we had some awesome antennas and hardware and that sort of thing that Tim provided to our group. And so we just took that along. And we had LBS, which I think Tim was involved with. And we took all Flex radios. We had Flex 7600s and then ACOM. ACOM supported us, but I think actually Tim made that happen because Tim had them in stock and got them replaced from ACOM. We operated from Andy Christian's home, and he's 7th generation of Fletcher Christian. So we were actually staying at the home of the 7th generation from Fletcher Christian, the original mutineer on the Bounty. So that was pretty cool. And so we wanted to do a few things that would be interesting. 60 meters had never been active, and EME had never been active on this island. So we decided to do 6 meters. We also used the old radio site for 160 and 80. And then we duplicated really from 40 up to 10 meters. Well, that's not true. 40, 30, and 20 on both sites. I'll skip ahead a little bit. We had several team members that you probably be aware of who they are. And everybody has a job. I got involved because my business location is really convenient for testing and getting the containers loaded and that sort of thing. So I have the container there for actually we still have Beauvais Islands container, and we have the container we sent to Pitcairn there, and so it's easy to be ready for the next Dxpedition. I did all the radio setups, all the integration with the the logging program N1MM. I actually manage the QSLs for the Dxpedition, and I have a 501c3F so that we can take care of all of the financial matters for the Dxpedition, so it's not taxable to anyone. And you can see all the other responsibilities everybody else had. So here was the team. You can see Alan, EA3HSO. He was a newbie and a great guy, lots of fun, mostly sideband. Of course, Nodir is very famous, EY8MM. He's famous for a couple of different reasons. One is 160-meter operation. And the other thing is he's a fantastic photographer, and I'm going to show you some pictures. Hal, JR4OZR, we had gone to Beauvais and back. You got K9CT, Ralph. Pat was a new guy, Pat Kane, myself, Mike, George, Arnie, who was the team doctor, SM5AQD, Hawk. I've been on many Dxpeditions with Hawk. Glenn Johnson, who was actually a doctor as well. W0VTT, Mike was a newbie, just retired from the military. And W6IZT, Greg, and Hal, W8HC. And you'll see many pictures of them. So all of the planning, all of the setup, everything that we had to do, we had to get everything ready. One of the things we found out after coming back from Beauvais was that we were planning this and we had to get the gear ready so it could be shipped to arrive in New Zealand by the right time to actually be able to load the Braveheart and get it back to Pitcairn. So we wanted the gear there so that when we arrived, all the gear had arrived. So we had to pack everything. So what we did is we got together the weekend before Dayton 2 years ago, and we emptied the 40-foot container. We checked everything and repacked. And of course, you have to do all of this for customs. So I'm going to show you, this is actually the container we used for Beauvais, even though it says repacked, that was actually full. And you can't see that, but above there, you can see look at the very top. I'm going to put my mouse up here. That is all mast provided by DX Engineering, all tilt-up masts. And so we took everything out of that trailer, you can see. And of course, we had all kinds of gear that we ended up donating to like these beds over here to missions and that sort of thing, so that because we needed those on some of these other island trips, but we ended up donating them so they get used and that sort of thing. This is repacking. All of the Pelican cases are full of flex radio. Each one of these contained a flex radio, a Maestro, a laptop, any of the network gear, headphones. Each one was self-contained. And you can see the 160 antenna at the very top here. And then we packed it all up and we had it picked up. We had to get it, we get a crane, we load it on a truck. They take it to a port. It's put it on well, they actually put it on a train, took it to a port, and then it's taken by ship through the canal zone all the way to New Zealand. So our total project cost was $126,000. We require the team to provide half. We always do 50% of the cost. And what happens is hams generally in one way or the other, whether it's through clubs or individual whatever, or with QSLing, they provide the other part of it. So we broke even. We're very, so we received genuine support from the entire ham radio community. So as an example of how we had to get there, it was a flight to LAX, which is Los Angeles, from Minneapolis. We had a 3-hour layover there. This was at midnight. So then an 8-hour flight to Tahiti. Then we stayed for two nights in the airport hotel, which is right across from the airport. And that was so we could make sure we made the 5 o'clock in the morning flight out of Tahiti to Mangareva. And then to be there, we actually took a ferry to the Braveheart. We're there just for a few hours and then departed. Then by boat, 34 hours to Pitcairn. And then obviously to come back, you had to reverse that. So you can see when we said easy, yes, everything's practical, you can do it, but it requires a little bit of logistical management. So here we are getting ready to leave Minneapolis. 4 of us that could leave from that location. And that's Pat Kane, K0PC, W0VTT, Glenn Johnson, and myself sitting there ready to go. So here we're getting ready to go, and there's Tahiti. Now, just to point out a little bit about this, Tahiti is all French. All of this Polynesian area right here is French. And they're divided into kind of like counties. And every one you can see like Marquesas, Tuamato, you can see all these Gambier. They would consider them like a county. So they have a separate government management. Tahiti obviously is just one island of many, many, many thousands of islands. This is actually the airport hotel. When we landed, this is the first thing, we couldn't check in. So we ended up, well, our view from the airport hotel, you can see the airport literally across the street. And to the left of that is actually another island. And a lot of people go there for vacation. So if anybody says Tahiti to you, they probably go to Tahiti and then they go to the other island. And so what we had to do to use our time was we did a little shopping, and it was for a very short period of time. But there's the breadfruit. That's a very large one. And we actually asked for that when we were on Pitcairn, and they had some. And to me, it just tasted bland, very bland. It needed seasoning or something, but it was edible. It was like a vegetable of some sort, but without very much taste. So we had to land at a very small island right here, and then we ended up taking a flight to here, and then we ended up in the Pitcairn Islands after taking a boat, of course. I want you to know, so Pitcairn Islands take up 4 different islands. Ducie is a separate country because it has enough separation, but these are actually English. So we leave France to go to England. We had to go through customs in Pitcairn, which of course is really more of a formality. But then we have to re-enter going backwards. So it's just stuff to think about when you're getting your passports and making sure everything's ready to take a trip like this. Oino is actually where the Pitcairn Islanders would go to get wood to make a lot of things. So I asked for a souvenir, and they carved a copy of the Bounty, the ship Bounty, and they did that for several of us actually. And we pay, and you can buy them on their website, but they go to this island over here and get the wood for those when they do carvings. Henderson and then Ducie. So here we are in Mangareva, and as we approached the Braveheart, of course, the Braveheart, and this is just a small community. We walked around a little bit, and you could visit. And that's Nigel's son, Matt, and Matt's son. So that would be Nigel's grandson. And he was the captain of the ship. And he was actually the captain of the ship when I went to Amsterdam Island. A very competent man. But when Matt decided he didn't want to go to sea anymore, this might have been his last voyage with us. He brought his wife and his son, who didn't really like being at sea very much because you can get quite sick. But anyhow, that was a great picture that No Deer took. So here's our first view that morning of Pitcairn. We arrived about 4 or 5 in the morning. So as the sun came up, we could see the island shrouded in fog. I think that was the most, well, that's not true because we had a storm in the middle of our operation that I'll show you. But we thought, wow, what a dreary island. But it turned out much better than that. So here's a satellite view, and I'm going to take my mouse here and show you where Bounty Bay is. It's right in here. And so let's go back. That's Bounty Bay. That's actually right down here where my mouse is, where the Bounty still is. It was burned and sunk. And then this is where the longboats are. And the village of Adamstown is right up here. So when we go to the next view, you can see here's Adamstown. And that's where we were, right in here, where we landed. So here we are unloading. And here's everybody on a longboat, except you can see that George, N4GRN, suffered quite a severe injury, quite debilitating. He was in a lot of pain, and he probably should have just stayed on the boat. But he was a stubborn guy. And of course, when you have enough pain pills, you think you're fine and you're going to be fine. But that wasn't the case. He needed to go back. He had several cracked ribs and broken bones, and he didn't even know how bad it was when he fell. So he fell on the boat and really did some damage. So here we are arriving, and just to show you, our operating site is like ideal for ham radio. We're up high. That was that's Andy's house. And then the old radio site is right here. So you can see, here's another location. You can actually see the house right over here. I got the mouse here. So this is actually a previous view of them bringing all of the gear aboard when they arrived earlier. So when we arrived, all the gear was here. And you can see the pathway up from Bounty Bay. It's really quite steep, and it's quite steep all the way up because it's 2,000 feet up. Here's all of the gear as it was stored a month prior to us arriving. Turns out this was going to be our bedroom because it was a garage that Andy had added onto his house. But here's all of the gear, and we use these 33-gallon garbage cans, I guess you'd call them. And we bought them in the States, and they contained all the power cables and our coaxial cables because they are all wrapped and round, and they're easy to ship that way. The radios, this is all of the other operating gear. The antennas and everything were outside. You can see here's the ACOM amplifiers, and you can see we didn't have any cardboard. They don't allow cardboard. We can't ship it there. So we had to unpack, we carefully unpacked all the ACOM amps, kept the boxes, all the packing material, and then we had these special boxes made and shipped them in the plywood boxes. I'll bet you Tim recognizes this. He raised it in some field not too far from DX Engineering, and that's the 160 antenna plus. Tim, are you going to say something? No, I thought I heard somebody say something, but anyhow, yep, all of the other antennas and everything stacked here and all the built up bases. So on the other end of Andy's house from where you saw the other gear stored, we moved the radios that we're going to use over here. This is all the Pelican cases. You can see where this would be a great party room, but it turned out it was a great operating room for our, so this is the same room, but those are the windows on the right that we're now looking at. And this looks straight out. You can't see Bounty Bay. You'd have to step out a ways, but you can see the ocean from here. It's quite a view. This is in the middle of the house is our dining area. And this is the upper bedrooms. And then I'll show you later some pictures of where we slept in the garage. So that's Andy's house. That's actually before he painted it. And then the radio site. Now I'm going to show you a little video here. This is some of the mud, volcanic mud that's everywhere. They're trying to get our gear. And of course, we had to walk that every time we had a shift change when we went over to the radio site. So the first day we actually set up 5 Yagis. We used the K5GO Yagis, there are 3 elements. And we had 10, 12, 15, 17, and 20 meters set up. We also set up verticals for 30 and 40 meters at one site. So we could set up 4 stations and be operational in just a few hours. And we made some QSOs. We arrived obviously very early in the morning. We got started as soon as we possibly could. And we operated 20, 30, and 40 meters our first night that we were there. Here we are setting up all of the different antennas. We had plastic laid out, so when we dropped a screw, we could be able to pick it up. Here we are, you could see all of the, how we did that. Just some more sites here of us putting up different antennas. These are all DX Engineering made. Fantastic. They're actually set up to go up 30 feet high. And because we were at a very high elevation, we set them up for 20 feet. But you can see how they would be, just clasped together with couplings. And you could see the rings there so that you could rotate. And we had ropes to rotate in every antenna. You can see there's a rope tied right here on the reflector so that we could rotate the antennas. So every one of these was a falling derrick, and then after it was up, you could pull this out and go up and set up another one. This was the EME setup on 6 meters, and most of the time it was like this as we followed the moon into the sky. This is our power generation for Andy's house, that location. Now they had power on the island from 6 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, but it was also very noisy power. So actually we found out after a couple of days, it was actually more beneficial for us to use our own generation of power. One thing that we noticed though is how noisy it was on the island until 10 o'clock at night, especially on EME. The signal to noise ratio was not very good until when the power went off. So this was the whole site taken with a drone. So you can see 30, 20, 15, different antennas all over the place, 30 meters, 40 meters. The lowest frequency that we went on this location was 40. We knew we were going to do CQ worldwide sideband, so we actually stayed off of 80 and 160 sideband until the contest. So here is the old radio site. It was very interesting. And one thing I want you to notice is this red dirt, the red clay volcanic material. It's just, it's fine to walk on, but you get red all over the place. And when it turns to mud, it's very slippery. In World War II, this was a military site, military radio station. And this fenced in area here, there was a 200-foot tower here that they finally took down. And I'm going to show you why they took down the towers. So here it tells a little bit about the old radio station. So after the military left, it became a broadcast station for the Polynesian Islands. Here's some of the old radio transmitters, and that's No Deer standing there as we kind of investigated where we were going to set up our station. You can see they had their ham radio station. This was a VP6PAC, and they had antenna switches here, and they had old antennas, but they haven't used it in a long time. They just had these radios covered up. We lifted them up just to take pictures of it. They're actual ham radios, but the rest was old military stuff, and you could see the mold and just awful. Look, just show you some more pictures. Look at the carpet. Anyhow, we cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned. Look at the green. That was our radio site. See the old solar panel? Take a look at this, a Marconi Transarctic. And then this was with the gear all set up. So you can see we really cleaned up the floor, got everything pretty well cleaned up. This was generally 80 meters on the left, 160 on the right, and we did 40, 20, 30 meters. Usually, it would just depend on what time of day, of course. And we'd have anywhere from 2 to 3 operators generally at the radio site. So this is a weather station. So if you ever look up Pitcairn weather, this is where the weather comes from, and it's all solar powered. This is a 160 meter vertical, which was awesome. And we thought just a really cool thing here. It actually, DX Engineering created a special manual just for this antenna. And I'm going to show you a video in a minute, but here's a perspective of it looking down the hill at the antenna. But boy, what a great antenna. There's all the parts and pieces all ready to go. Here we are putting it together. All the radials, everything ready to go. Here's the antenna ready to go up. And I'm going to show you a video. If you listen very carefully, "90-foot tall with a T." Actually, I think it's 4. It's top hat. First time. So then we spent the rest of the time leveling and making sure everything was secure. We had everything already laid out, carefully done. So anyhow, that's what it looked like looking up. Just a fantastic antenna, and boy, did it work. So this is what it looks like when it was, and you can see there's a DX Engineering radio plate. That's a custom-made tilt plate, and you can see the insulators. Just fantastic engineering. This is what it looks like close up. Those are rebar. That's an LBS matching box, and it worked. Actually, we obviously use it on CW, but during the CQ Worldwide phone contest, we changed the tuning so that it worked well, maybe 50 kilohertz or 60, 70 kilohertz higher in the band. This is what it looked like at night, and this is a No Deer picture. Look at that picture. Look at the stars. The only lights were the lights in the station. We had the generator running here so that we had the lights. This is what it looked like in the daytime, and you can see the 160 here. That's the 80-meter vertical, which is a spider pole that we just wound a wire around, and I'll show you that in a little bit. The 20-meter antenna is over here. We had a 30-meter here and a 40-meter here. So this is also a matching transformer for the beverages. We had them for North America, EU, and JA. And then the LBS, this is the antenna selector, and it's split to both radios. So you'd have it go to radio 1 or radio 2. And you could actually select the direction. You just hit the button and it selected which beverage that you got. And then it had a splitter on it so that we could split to both radios. And this is obviously 1,100-foot beverage. So this is looking down on the site. You can see it's just really kind of neat. Look at the Norfolk pines. A little story about that. On 2 or 3 occasions, the settlers of Pitcairn had to leave the island because they had no food and they had no supplies. So they would leave and they were transported to Norfolk Island. And when they came back to resettle the island, they brought the Norfolk trees and planted them. This is why we didn't use any existing towers. Would you climb that tower? Or how about that tower? That's how bad. It's amazing to me that they were still up. This is an existing antenna that wasn't connected at all. We don't know if Dxpedition left it and then left it for the local club, but in fact, they had no way to operate it. It wasn't connected at all to anything. This is the base of the 80-meter, and you can see the DX Engineering on, and we have, or maybe it's a choke, I can't tell, but anyhow, and then the DX Engineering plate here for all the radials. So here we are, everything's assembled, everything's ready to go. You can see, and the 40-meter vertical, 30-meter vertical, and this is, and of course, this is, we always lay down the tarp and assemble our, obviously the wind was blowing, so we had all the gas tanks, gas cans sitting there holding everything down. This is the 20-meter Yagi, and we found out later that this marker was in memoriam of Andy Christian's father, who would have been 6th generation. And we've used these wherever we go. This is a great thing for field day or any place you go where all your antennas come to the other side of this plate. And then you know what's available when you're a radio operator to be able to go over and select an antenna. And so we've used these for a long time, almost every Dxpedition that I go on with this team. And the other thing is you end up with no ground issues, interconnections between other stations because this is completely isolated, insulated. So this is what it looked like at night, 80 meters. Actually, that looks like it's set up for FT8 for some reason. That one too. Maybe it was just getting ready for the sideband contest. I don't remember. Because I was just looking at the bandwidth of the spectrum scope. So one of the things we always like to look at is the gray lines, and you can see where the antipode is. It's clear over here in the Middle East. And so I think that's zone 16, and I'll make a comment about that in a minute. But you can see where the gray lines go all the way around the world here. This is what I look again another night. One of the first nights that we operated here was actually the second night for 160. No Deer was operating, and he made 714 QSOs on 160, which is really, really awesome. And this is what our team setup was in Andy's house. So we had 2 stations simultaneously. Most of the sideband and FT8 operation occurred right here during normal time, but it doesn't mean you couldn't be on CW or anything else. But generally, the CW operation occurred at the other site. We had 3 4-man teams. And by the way, we originally started with 14 people, but we ended up operating with 12 because K9CT had surgery and couldn't go with us. And then, of course, George got hurt after really the first couple of days. He operated for a little bit, but he was in such pain that he was medically evacuated back. So this was our shifts. We alternated 3 and 4 hour shifts. So you might be on for 3 hours or 4 hours, then you'd be off for 3 or 4 hours, and then you'd be back on. Every 21 hour cycles, you rotated complete times. So we did that continuously. So you can imagine it was hard to get an 8-hour sleep because it was not possible. But we did the best we could. And when you're on a Dxpedition, that's what you do. You just operate. We operated for 2 weeks. So give you what it kind of looks like as the day drew to evening. And of course, I wanted to just see this view. It's just a beautiful view out in the ocean. And of course, FT8 can be very relaxing. And in fact, I could never understand why Hal had his headphones on while he was operating FT8, but it put him to sleep. And so we always thought that was a funny picture of Hal. Some more operating. And of course, that's myself standing there watching. I probably couldn't sleep. So in fact, Arnie was probably saying, well, do you want to operate? He was probably exhausted. So this is what it looked like. I'm going to let you hear a little bit in a minute. So here, when we were there, was this period of time between October and early November. And it's supposed to be a low time for rain. And look at the temperature. It's 77 degrees for high to 82. And the lowest is 64 and then 69. So you get a really nice temperature range. And it's supposed to be very little rain. Well, that wasn't really true. Take a look at this. This is a map from Windy, and this was approaching us. And the next thing you know, we're in all this rain. And the mud was amazing. And of course, we kept our shifts. We kept walking. Quite often, I would operate from the radio site because I generally like to do CW most of the time. So I would go over there, and then I also I operated at night a lot of times on 80 and 160. I just enjoy that. So anyhow, we'd end up walking over there. But look at the mud, and it's very slippery. Look at the red mud. And once it's on you, it is on you. So it really, really rained. Just a little video to kind of show you. And then we had a little damage because the winds overnight got pretty intense. And we ended up, you can see an antenna laying on the ground. We had to go out and pick up some antennas. The top mast or on the 160 got bent a little bit. It still worked fine, but the wind really took it. But we had a guide well. So one part of this, that because it overlapped with the CQ Worldwide Sideband contest, we decided that we would operate the contest. So we stopped a couple hours before the contest started with the Dxpedition, and then we commenced the sideband contest. And we had spots, and initially we had spots for both sites, but because of the rain and everything, and maybe some lightning, we're not sure, we lost our link between the sites. So one bad thing about that is our timing was off initially until we figured out what was going on at the second site. But this was what it looked like. So here we are operating. And I'm gonna, if you listen now, you can hear them operate.
November 5, Philadelphia, thank you. QRZ, Mr. Papa 6 Radio. Okay, the Zulu 2 again.
Kilo Alpha 3, Papa Juliet X-ray. Kilo 7, Papa, I think. Kilo Zulu 2 India.
Thank you. Mr. Papa 6 Radio, QRZ.
Papa Charlie X-ray.
Kilo 1 Hotel Hotel, 5932.
Okay, the operators left to right way over there initially when.
Here's a summary from web.de.
Oops. One of the operators on the left on 10 meters was K0PC. That's no deer that I was talking about, EY8MM. And then that's HAL N6HC operating here. And of course, we had the other site. We also had operators there. So this is how we ended up. Actually, I'm going to skip ahead. This is an easier one to read. We ended up with 1,050 QSOs on 10 meters, which is very cool. And 19 zones, 46 countries on 10. And who would believe that? I mean, there was hardly any sunspots at that time. And we had a great count on 20 and 15, 2,700 QSOs on 20 and 2,500 on 15, and on 40, 1,000. And you can see we had a few QSOs on 160, 41. So we ended up with a score close to 14 million. We had over 8,000 QSOs. And we thought, for a field day site, we did pretty good. And so when we were looking at the results on 3830, here we are, VP6R. At the time, we were 8th. Of course, that's never all the scores, but it's always a great place to post your score to see how you did. We were so tickled to see that we were even in, even in competition with anybody. And so in the final results, you can see how we came out. We actually were 11th in the world. And you can see there's a couple of people here, K3LR and W3LPL were 13th and 14th. And to think that we could actually compete with these guys at such a remote site was really awesome. But of course, we were DX, and that helps a lot. So anyhow, we were very proud of that. One of the things that came up was we knew we had a timing issue, and I had to figure it. I had to get it fixed. And the reason I knew it had to be fixed is I didn't want to lose QSOs, and I didn't want anybody that worked us to lose QSOs. We knew that after a couple hours we had fixed the time, but it was only at the radio site that we were off, because we'd lost our time sync between the two, and we had a GPS to be able to get us on sync. But what we did after that was I had a GPS watch, and I could set that from my watch close enough, of course, to make sure that it worked for contest logging. But we didn't know we'd lost the link. So the computers were all off on time. So anyhow, in the middle of the night, I sent the CQ Worldwide contest manager, who I think is K1AR, John, and said our logs are kind of messed up and we need to fix them and blah, blah, blah. And he was very nice about that. And I said that I didn't want anybody to lose any QSOs. Anyhow, regardless, overnight, I figured it out. I got everything fixed and submitted the scores and put them on 3830, and then submitted them to CQ Worldwide, to the website. And then the next morning, I get an email, and he says, we got a rule. I know you got 2 sites. You got to be within 500 meters of each other. And I go, oh, really? So then I sat back down again, because I had no idea how far apart we were. And we had, so I got Google Earth, and I figured out that we were 467.5 meters apart from sites. So, maybe we might have been right at 500 meters at the farthest, but, I thought, gosh, that was pretty cool, because we didn't plan that. It just turns out to be what it was. But that's a rule. I didn't know that the sites had to be within 500 meters, but we sure found out. So we got saved by being lucky. And of course, then with all the rain, you can see everything getting wet and just being careful. Here's just some pictures of us operating. Just quickly go through them. K9NW, we called him Mikey the Machine, lives in Ohio, Southern Ohio, down by Cincinnati. There's myself. No, of course, that's no deer. Just some quick observations. One of the things when you do something that's so far away from Europe is you do get concerned as to how many stations you do work, because they really need it and they're trying very hard. We were very pleased that we worked 23% of our total QSOs on 160 in Europe. The other thing that we were very proud of, the antipode, remember I said zone 16, we did work 156 QSOs, and prior to that time, only 5 people had done it. So we were very fortunate in that we just operated every single night, continuously trying to be there so that when the conditions allowed it, we could work guys. So obviously that's a 160 station, and you can see what it looks like. And that's a noise as like a, I wouldn't call it lightning, but just a pop in the QRN. Obviously, we're operating all night. You get tired calling CQ. One thing we found, 10 meters is, waking up right now. But at the time we went, 10 meters was not really much alive at all. But we had TEP going for us, trans-equatorial propagation. The MUF at the equator is higher, so we're able to quite often work through that. And one thing we noticed at 8 o'clock in the morning every day, we could work along the equatorial path, the equator, and you could work CN, CT, D4, EA, EA8, almost, I can't say all day, but they were always there. They would just pop in almost any time with huge signals. This is 10 meters. And then every day, once the sun rose across the United States, we could track right across the United States. And almost all day, when it was daylight in the United States, we always had propagation to anybody that wanted to work us. And then later in the evening, it would just immediately, like a light switch, change from USA to JA. So the same, again, very similar on 12 meters, kind of parallels that. We did work some high Europe. We noticed that at 9:30 in the morning, and it was very interesting, had heavy AU flutter. Just some interesting observations. One thing about this, within literally 8 minutes here, we worked 5 continents: Asia, Europe, North America, Oceania, South America, just to show you how open 30 meters is if you're on it. Of course, we made close to 8,000 QSOs on 30 meters. We on 60 meters, we chose to operate only FT8. In fact, in the whole Dxpedition, we were prepared to operate RIDI, but we ran FT8 and we did Foxhound. And so we ended up working a lot of people on 60 meters. We ended up with 53% EU, which is amazing. All FT8. By the way, we had to have special permission from the New Zealand government to do this. Here's the 60 meter vertical. There's just some examples of some of the QSOs, and you're logging them all at the same times. And so look at the rate on that we were. So our 10-minute rate was 537 QSOs, 60-minute rate, 383 QSOs an hour. It's just awesome. What we were doing, that was Glenn Johnson operating. I'm going to take you on a little tour real quick. This is looking down, to give you a little tour, looking down on Adamstown from where we were. And this is this is, by the way, all, I can't say all, but most of these pictures are no deer and his processing in, say, Lightroom and that sort of thing. He's just an extraordinary photographer. So just a tour of the island again in Norfolk Pine, and you can see the trails that you could just walk. You can see, I'm going to show you a trail right here. And we walked all over. Anytime we could, and the weather was decent, we would go for a walk to explore the island. Some of the points, you'll notice there's really no beach. It's all rock. Look at the fish. This is, of course, beautiful because it's a beautiful horizon, but it's got antennas in it. This is looking up at our 20-meter antenna. Towards the evening, then this is actually looking up from down low. This is a Seventh-day Adventist church that was located in the downtown Adamstown area. And just something to note about this, that they've always been religious from the very beginning. And this, I don't know how long this church has been here, but the church has been ongoing really since the 1800s. But one thing, this is right after the rain. See the rainbow to the right here? But here's a better picture. I have never seen a rainbow like this. We were up at Andy's house and looking down, and I have a picture of that rainbow going from one side of the island to the other. It was magnificent. Just beautiful. Look at, here's the sun, but look in the sky at all the stars. A lot of time-lapse photography. And I would stand there with no deer at night while he was taking these, and he'd be pointing out all these, you know, locations of cluster, you know, just all kinds of things that he seemed to know. Yeah, but it's just, if you want to feel small in the world, just go to an island where there's no light and look up. It's just unbelievable. Obviously a time lapse. make you dizzy. This is the valley that goes down to Adamstown. Of course, our operating site is right where my mouse is. The radio site was here. There's the Braveheart. A couple of small friends here, the crabs that are coming on next to the when we're next to the ocean. I'm going to show you coming up here pretty soon, St. Paul's Pools. And this is a place where they can go down in the water, but you don't dare go down there when the seas are very active. And the seas would come in crashing across here, and the water would flow directly across here to your left and out back out to the ocean. And I would say it was moving at 20, 30 miles an hour. So you wouldn't want to be down there when it's doing all of this, but it was magnificent to be a part of this, to see it. This is actually to the left of this. This is where it went back out to the ocean. Here we are going to St. Paul's Pool down the trail. That's myself standing here and no deer's taking the picture. Just absolutely gorgeous colors. Of course, the Braveheart way down there. Look at the whale. I'll tell you a little bit about that whale in a minute. At night, again, does it make you look, maybe that's the Milky Way? all the stars. This is Andy's house. You notice the color of his house. That's what it was painted. I showed you that picture earlier, and that was before he repainted everything. And so it really stood out on the island. This is when we went down to the radio site, we would go down this little path here, and we'd go down to the bottom, maybe another 100 feet from where this picture was taken, and then you would turn immediately to your left, and it was about, I'd say, it's longer than a quarter of a mile, probably between a quarter and a half, but it always took about 20 minutes. And when it was slick, you had to be very, very careful about walking. This is Andy, and he's quite a character. And he has a pizza business in his house. And I told him that one of my favorite things to do after a contest is take our team to the local pizza place. And so I always buy pitchers of beer and beet pizza and onion rings. And of course, he says, well, I can make pizza and we can get beer. So at the end of the contest, here's Andy has this big pizza oven. So he says, I'll make the pizza for you. So here he is making the pizza. So at the end of the CQ Worldwide Sideband, he made all this pizza for us. And we were just so happy. And then, of course, we had a couple cocktails and stuff. And in our last night that was there, he had cooked all this food for us. And I don't know who he thought was going to eat it all, but steaks and sausages and just all kinds of food for us to eat, to celebrate. Just a few more pictures of the site while we were operating, different operators. That's SM5AQD, EA3HSO, HAL, W8 Hotel Charlie, who's actually, I think, going to be going out on a little trip here pretty soon to an IOTA. Mike, W0VTT, who is a professional trombone player. He played for the United States military. And Pat, K0PC, Glenn Johnson, W0GJ, myself. And of course, next to Glenn is a tortoise that obviously is quite old, I think 100 and some years old. And she was all by herself. At one time, she had a mate who died. And of course, this is very similar to, I guess, what you'd find at the Galapagos Islands. And next to where her habitat were beehives. And there are no pesticides or herbicides or anything used on the island. So you can buy their honey, and we all bought a lot of their honey, brought it home. It's very pure and very just sweet tasting honey. That's HAL. Here we are taking everything down. We gave that vertical to Meralda, and she gets on really literally almost every single day from Pitcairn's, and she's on Facebook. So if you really want to contact her and make a sked or something like that, she'd be glad to do that. We ended up buying, I think maybe a couple of iterations of radios for her. Here she is with the honey that was harvested. There's a lot of the HMS Bounty things. Obviously, that's the anchor from the HMS Bounty. But if you went up this little alley to the left here, there's a museum from the island, and there's a lot of artifacts from the Bounty. Here's the cannon that was on the Bounty. So I'm going to go back and tell a little story. When we had done it was on Friday. Remember, we had a dinner, and Saturday we were going to leave. And on Friday, we're taking gear down and everything. And I think we had it all down by noon. And we were going to walk. And at the time, the Marine radio alerted us that a person that was staying with Andy's mom, Brenda, that she was caretaking for had died. And he was, I believe, 90 some years old. And so tradition on the island is if you die, you're buried the same day before the sun goes down. So all the men on the island that were carpenters were summoned to build a casket. And so they immediately left, Andy immediately left to go down. And then they found out that there were some relatives that were en route there and that they would be there the next day. So they decided against that and they would bury him in the morning. So they were going to have a farewell dinner for us anyhow. But so this was kind of a combination of the ship arrived, the relatives appeared, they had the funeral. We actually attended the funeral. And then these people were people that were guests on that boat, and some were relatives. A lot of the natives of the island were sitting over here on the right, and they provided all the food and served us a buffet. That's the buffet table right here in the middle. So we had a chance to meet everybody on the island and attend a local funeral. And in fact, here's VR6TC or VP6TC, Tom Christian's grave, and right next to him was the person that died. And to go back to what was interesting, they were doing the service, and in between the trees out to the ocean, the whale appeared, and we could all see it. It was just like great timing. This was kind of in summary here. When we got all done, we made 82,223 QSOs. And this was the breakdown by mode. And on CW was the grand winner. Obviously, the way propagation is in late 2019 wasn't the best, but we still did okay. 42%, and I say that because there's mode preference. Sideband is usually the hardest to get through. But CW, of course, is a principal way of getting through almost any time. And so 42% of our QSOs were CW, 30% FT8, and 28% sideband. And what's interesting is notice how much was on Europe, almost 21%. And you can see 52% right below that was USA. But that's how it generally breaks down. JA is usually represents 22% is JA. It says Asia, but mostly that's what it is. So here's the team with our VP6R shirts on, and all of our nationalities represented by the team. And of course, NCDXF is a principal sponsor, as well as Flux Radio and DX Engineering. And I think they had, I'm pretty sure they had sent that to us, and then we signed one and sent it back to DX Engineering. And I don't know where that's at, but I'll bet you Tim's got a story that goes with that. And here we are departing the island. And the reason I'm going to skip ahead here, big thank yous, of course, to all of our supporters and the foundations and the large and clubs that have helped us out. But I'm going to show you, of course, here's some movies that you could watch. You could go on any of the streaming services right now, probably, and pick one and watch it. I want to show you this video that EA3HSO, who is a professional photographer, videographer, put together.
Okay.
If you go up the and look up to the ball ground, every mile of the hill, where the town of every cloud. Will you make it good? Will you make it good? And bury the no right down on the hill, honest for God. If the foul is loose, and so come out, get out, you stop. Will you make it good? The apples on the top. Will you make it good? And bury the no out on a bed and never sister to flow. How was the time when the fish began to go?
Victor Papa Sigrid.
Kilo Echo 5 Bravo Romeo, 5 and none. Thank you.
Between time in the radio 5 and 9. The X-ray connecting to the members.
You ready to go the crazy?
Give me a whole solid cow. Uli, uli, kick, and baby, no good job. Uli, uli, kick, give me a whole solid cow. Uli, uli, kick, and baby, no good job. Uli, uli, kick.
My friend.
And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be glad to take any questions or whatever.
Go
So
ahead,
I-
Roy. What was your question, Roy?
How long was the ship that you took to the island?
I think it's about 120 feet. 110, 120.
It looks like it bounced around a lot out there on the ocean. Huh?
That would be correct. You need a scopolamine patch.
What did the
Then you
Brave,
get, then you get dopey.
what did the Braveheart do while you guys were operating?
They left us. I've never been left on an island, but they actually went to Mangareva because there's no cove or harbor, real harbor for them to be in there at Pitcairn. So they went back to Mangareva and just stayed in that harbor that they were in there because it's very calm, so that the wife and son and all of that, they could just be kind of on vacation. They actually did some work on the boat, I understand, while we were gone, while they were away, and then they came back, I would say a day or two early. But a Russian vessel came by and picked up George and took him back to Tahiti and flew him back to the United States. There's only 2 flights a day or a week to Mangareva, so he was lucky. He got there, and then they put him on a flight to Tahiti, put him in the hospital, and then and he was accompanied by a nurse the whole time, and they shipped him back.
Greg, how long were you guys actually on the island?
About 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, we like to do Dxpeditions for 2 weeks or so, just so that you can get a sense, especially on 160. it takes about 2 weeks before you can actually work everybody. And you got to be on every single day. I mean, we look back at Amsterdam Island, and I'm sure Tim's seen the plot of that where we plotted it out. But if you don't operate every single day and you're not on every day, you're going to miss them. It's too spotty. So we just learned our lessons about just being on all the time.
How long were you actually gone from the States then? More like 3 weeks total?
I think just under 4 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. That was a smaller time because we had to spend a lot of time just traveling.
Right.
But like Amsterdam, we were gone 6 weeks. You know, when I went to Swains Island, and then I went from there to Conway Reef. I was gone a long time, almost 7 weeks.
Wow.
So.
Other than the day that you guys had that big rainstorm, how was the weather overall there? Or did
It was
rain?
generally pleasant. The storm actually lasted like 3 or 4 days. It just sat on top of us.
Oh, boy.
And it was not good. I actually had a pair of shoes for the mud and everything, and whatever's in that mud is got an acidic thing to it because it just took the bottom right out of my shoes. And I had another pair of shoes, thank God. But you know, you pack a lot of stuff. We all sent gear with the container, besides the other clothes that we had with us, because you're restricted. Like on that small plane from Tahiti to Mangareva, you're only allowed one suitcase, and it was so many pounds. So we knew we were very limited.
So Craig, anytime you're traveling, you do a lot of planning and such, and then you get there and you say, oh crap, I forgot. So what did you forget?
You know, I don't think we forgot anything. We've learned some lessons over the years. I've just done so many of these, and we have lists and lists and lists already. You know, we had everything you can imagine. Fuses. I mean, it's just all this little stuff. A lot of times you think. What we didn't have enough of was probably beer. We found out who the storekeeper was, and they gave us a key, and they would open it up for us at night. And so it wasn't often that we would, but on a small island like that, you know, you think, do you have beer there? Well, we brought some beer, but we went through that pretty quickly. So you can never have enough beer, I guess.
Oh.
Some places you can go, like when we went to Devos Island, there was no beer, there was no nothing. So you're kind of really short of everything there. I'm going to tell you, when we were on Devos, we were so starved for a regular meal that when the weather was actually nice, George had his boat there, and they cooked meals for us, and he climbed the cliffs and brought us food in a backpack. So, but at Pitcairn, we had great food all the time. He told us what time he'd serve food each day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it was fantastic.
Hi, Craig. This is Rich, KB8GAE. And
Hi,
first
Rich.
off, thanks for all the contest QSOs and CWT QSOs over the years, along with the Dxpeditions. And I'm just curious, is there one Dxpedition that really stands out as your favorite?
Well, the two that really stand out are Navassa and Amsterdam, and Amsterdam more than anything, because we hit a peak of propagation there. I think we ended up with 180,000 Qs. Think about that.
From the Indian Ocean? Unbelievable.
And
I mean, you were banging in here on my dipole at 30 feet.
It's crazy.
Beyond belief.
We were on, we'd start calling CQ on 160 30 minutes before sunset, and we were still on 10 meters 4 hours into the darkness in the same shack. It was just crazy. We couldn't make up our mind if what we should be doing. It was just crazy. But we loved it.
Sometimes the stars really align up just right.
Yeah, propagation wise, that's one of the most amazing trips. I made some French friends for life, and I'm hoping that those connections actually turn into some other Dxpeditions to some extraordinarily rare places, which I'm working on right now. So,
Well, good
see
luck with
what happens.
Crozet.
Well, we'll see. Yep. That would be a top 10er, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Nothing to do with ham radio, but before she burned to the water line, the HMS Bounty, every night at sunset used to fire a cannon. And that, when I was a kid, when it was in St. Petersburg, Florida, I got to fire that cannon one time.
Well, that must have been a replica, right?
Maybe it was. I don't know. They said it was the original.
Well, the original, I know where it's at. They really did burn it to the ground, but they didn't want anybody to ever find him on that island.
Yep.
So.
Anybody else have any questions?
Question about the future.
Yeah.
Do we have a bench, of people that are going to be doing these Dxpeditions in the future?
Well, I hope so. You know, there's all kinds of young guys that ask to go, and most, you know, asking to go and then actually having the money and the time are really issues. You know, to be away when you do something really rare is takes a lot of time, and we're always upfront with guys. First of all, we always tell them you got to be a good operator. You need to operate it like Tim's place or somebody. You got to be on where you got to be a good contester. You got to be able to run people on CW and phone, and you really need to be a multi-mode person. You don't want somebody going along and they only do sideband. That's not a good thing because it's hard to schedule people when you're doing these shifts. So we always advise people. And then the other thing that's really good is we want to know that they've operated in teams and that they get along with people. I mean, if somebody operated and wanted to come along and they said they operated at Tim's station, I'd call up Tim and say, how'd you get along with the guy? That's number one, because it gets to be pretty tough out there in these islands. And you're out for a long time and you get really tired. And believe me, you find out who the other person is when they're really tired. And, so, you know, we've taken some people along and we show them the ropes. So a lot of times they're just really kind of surprised because of the hours and the shifts. It's just grueling. After about a week, it's really work. I mean, we still have a great time. I don't want to make it sound like it's awful or anything like that, but it is work. If you're sitting there running rate for days after days after day, it just gets to you after a while. It just does. And the thing is, you get a little weird when you do that. And you go, did I copy that right? You know, it's just, it gets to be crazy, you know. I can tell you some of the pileups too. People are of course, now everybody has such good radios. They're so smart about operating that they find you everywhere. And so you can't sneak off in the pileups and try to work guys high. The next thing you know, you got a pile up there and then you got to move around. So when you're bringing guys along, you want to make sure that they've got some experience. The problem with pileups is, where do you get that experience? And so contesting in the Caribbean, contesting in Central America, you know, things like that are great ways of, you know, showing that you can deal with it, because it's hard, especially when you listen to a European pileup. I've had guests at my station, just young guys, and they're really nice kids and they can operate fast and all that, but they run into a European pileup and it's like deer in the headlights. It's hard. Tim's smiling. He knows exactly what I'm talking about, because you hear that huge pileup and it's like, how do I get anything? And then you say, the Tango radio, and they still keep calling or whatever, you know. It's there's no control over Europe. So it's just tough. So you gotta learn.
Would it be safe to say when you come back from your Dxpedition like that, you don't touch a radio for a few days or a few weeks?
Yeah, I've done that. I'll just go away for a little while. I spend a lot of time with my wife and family and just do something else for a while.
That's kind of what I figured.
But I like ham radio, so it doesn't take me long to get back to it. But you do get a little burned out. And you won't find me rake chewing on sideband very often, because then the next thing you know, somebody stops by and then somebody else stops by and all that either too. So then you end up with, on and on and on. But I don't do too much of that. But I like CW. I like the CWTs in particular, getting on. So I'll do those. You got to work on your skills all the time.
Craig, how do you stay in such great shape? I mean, you look like you're 55.
Well, I ran this morning. I ran 7 miles this morning. I run 3 times a week, usually between 25 to 30 miles a week. But I'm older now. I used to run a lot more miles. But I don't know. I just actually bought another business too. So I got people that think I'm nuts, but I don't know what else to do. I got to do something. So everybody at work thinks if I go in, they'll say, "Oh, you act so young," and all. It's just nice to hear, but I'm an older person actually. So I did hire somebody, started Monday, and I found out he was the same age as I was. It shocked me. He wanted to work. I thought, okay, whatever. So I like experienced people. I think that they're wise and they're worth every nickel you pay them. So I'm all for that. I'd like to think that because of me myself, I'd like to think I'm wise too. Maybe it's just old age. So what about you, Tim? What do you do? You work all day. Running around DX Engineering.
Yeah, I don't know anything else. So
yeah,
it's a job for life, and I'm living the dream.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah. So I went to the station today. I worked a little bit today, and then I went to the station and did a CWT. I experimented with some new software updates from Flex Radio. I wanted to see what they were doing, and so I'm always doing something. They got a new tuner and we're testing that. It's about ready to be released. So it's kind of fun to be on that kind of, I won't call it bleeding edge, but part of that team too. So I like that stuff. It's fun. And I'm working on my station right now too. I decided I needed to do something. So, and I talked to Tim about this because I wanted to have more in-band QSOs. And with 15 and 10 more likely this year, I'm adding a couple of OWAs and farther away from my existing antenna. So I'm doing that. And then I got an 80-meter Yagi I had built 10 years ago, and I took it down because it was going to break a tower. And so I ordered a Luso so I could put it on that. So that's another summer project. So, and I got a 60-meter 4-square I'm going to put up, or not 4-square, but a 4 Yagi array for EME, because I'm at 2996 in DXCC challenge, so I want to get to 3000, and I'm going to get there somehow. So it might be on 6 meters, So I got plenty to do, lots to think about. Try to keep me young.
Might be a dumb question, but what's your background? Is that your station there behind you on the screen?
Yeah, that's my contest station, and that green strip right there is the station, and the shack is actually right there. My daughter lives in that house, and a year ago I bought that farm right there. So I put receiving antennas there until the farmer decides to farm it, which he will soon. So, but that's about 1,500 feet from here to here, 500 feet from here to here, 20 acres. So I have good isolation between the antennas, towers. That really pays off. Right, Tim? Isolation is everything. Yep. I learned all this before I built this from Timmy and a few others. I said, I don't want to screw this up. So I got some good advice.
Okay. Well, Craig, we really appreciate you being with us tonight. I'll check anybody got a last question for it. Okay, we've run the gamut there, Craig. Thank you very much. And it was very enjoyable evening, and I hope we can return a favor sometime.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. And I wish the best to your club. Good luck with field day. And I think Indiana QSO party's coming up too. That's in between us coming up. So there's probably a lot of things that will run into you. So 73s.
Thank you.